He stood in front of the tomb. Lazarus had been dead for 4 days. Jesus knew what would happen next. He knew his friend would walk out alive, breathing, completely restored. He had the power to undo death itself with a single word. And still, Jesus wept. Why would the Son of God cry when he was about to perform the greatest miracle anyone had ever witnessed? What does it mean when God himself breaks down in tears, even when he knows exactly how the story ends? We're diving into one of the most mysterious and beautiful moments in all of Scripture. By the end of this video, you'll understand why Jesus' tears might be the most important detail in the entire resurrection story. If you're ready to see God's heart in a completely new way, hit that like button now. To understand why Jesus wept, we have to understand what led to this moment. Because this wasn't a sudden tragedy. This was a calculated delay. When Jesus first heard that Lazarus was sick, his response was shocking. Instead of dropping everything and rushing to Bethany, he stayed where he was for 2 more days. 2 days while his close friend was dying. 2 days while Mary and Martha sent increasingly desperate messages. Think about how this must have felt to them. They knew Jesus could heal people. They'd seen him restore sight to the blind, make the lame walk, cleanse lepers with a touch. Surely their brother, Jesus' dear friend, would be an easy case. But Jesus doesn't come. And Lazarus dies. By the time Jesus finally arrives in Bethany, Lazarus has been in the tomb for 4 days. In Jewish understanding, this was significant. They believed the soul lingered near the body for 3 days before departing completely. After 4 days, there was no question. Lazarus was not just dead, he was very dead. Martha meets Jesus on the road before he even reaches the village, and listen to the pain in her words. Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. There's faith there, but there's also hurt. There's trust, but there's also confusion. Jesus responds with one of his most famous declarations. I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live, even though they die. It's a beautiful, powerful statement. Martha even responds with a confession of faith. But then Mary arrives, and where Martha was theological, Mary is purely emotional. She falls at Jesus' feet and says the exact same words. Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But this time, something different happens. John tells us that when Jesus saw Mary weeping, and the Jews who had come with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. And then comes the shortest verse in the Bible, but perhaps one of the most profound. Jesus wept. Here's what makes this moment so puzzling. Jesus knew exactly what he was about to do. Just minutes before, he had told Martha, "Your brother will rise again." He had declared himself to be the resurrection and the life. He had come to Bethany specifically to demonstrate his power over death. This wasn't uncertainty. This wasn't panic. This wasn't grief over a permanent loss. Jesus knew that in a few minutes he would call Lazarus out of that tomb. He knew that sorrow would turn to joy, that mourning would become dancing, that this funeral would become the greatest celebration Bethany had ever seen. Why the tears? Some people try to explain this away. They say, Jesus was just putting on a show for the crowd, pretending to be sad so his miracle would seem more impressive. But that's not the Jesus we know from Scripture. He never performed for applause, and he certainly wouldn't fake grief. Others suggest he was crying because he knew Lazarus would have to die again someday, that this resurrection was only temporary. But that doesn't quite fit either, because Jesus raised other people from the dead without weeping first. No, there's something deeper happening here. Something that reveals the very heart of who God is and why he chose to become human. The Greek word used here for wept is interesting. It's not the word for loud wailing or dramatic sobbing. It's the word for tears flowing quietly down someone's face. This wasn't a breakdown. This was a breaking open, and the phrase deeply moved is even more revealing. In the original language, it carries the idea of being disturbed, agitated, even indignant. Some scholars suggest it could be translated as, he snorted with anger, or he was furious. What was Jesus so moved by? What stirred up such deep emotion in the Son of God? I believe Jesus was crying for 3 reasons. and each one reveals something profound about the nature of God. First, he wept as a friend. Never forget that Jesus was fully human. He had real friendships, real emotions, real experiences of loss. John's Gospel specifically tells us that Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. This wasn't just pastoral concern. This was personal grief. Even though Jesus knew he would reverse this death, he still felt the weight of what death does to the people left behind. He saw Mary's tears, Martha's pain, the genuine agony of a community that had lost someone they loved, and his human heart broke with theirs. This is beautiful because it means God doesn't just understand our grief intellectually. He has experienced it personally. When you're standing at a graveside, when you're holding the hand of someone you're about to lose, when you're walking through the valley of the shadow of death, you're not alone. God has been there. God has wept those same tears. Second, he wept in compassion. But there's more happening here than personal grief. Jesus was entering into the pain of everyone around him. He was absorbing their sorrow, feeling their confusion, carrying their heartbreak. This wasn't weakness. This was love in its purest form. God could have remained emotionally distant, untouched by human suffering. He could have fixed the problem without feeling the pain. But instead, he chose to feel what we feel, to hurt when we hurt, to weep when we weep. Isaiah prophesied about the Messiah. Surely he took up our pain and bore our suffering. We usually think of that in terms of the cross, but maybe it started right here, at Lazarus' tomb. Jesus wasn't just going to solve our problems. He was going to experience them first. But the third reason is the deepest, and it changes everything. He wept in holy rage at death itself. Remember that word, deeply moved? It suggests not just sadness, but anger. Jesus was standing face to face with his greatest enemy. Not Satan, not sin, not suffering, but death. The final consequence of humanity's rebellion against God. The ultimate separator. The thief that steals everyone we love. And Jesus was furious. This wasn't just about Lazarus. This was about every parent who had buried a child, every spouse who had become a widow, every friend who had said a final goodbye. This was about the cruel reality that in a world created for life, death always seemed to have the last word. But here's the profound truth. Jesus wasn't crying despite knowing he could fix this. He was crying because of what it would cost to fix it permanently. See, raising Lazarus wasn't just a miracle, it was a preview, a demonstration of the power Jesus possessed over death. But it was also a commitment, a declaration of war against humanity's greatest enemy. And Jesus knew something that no one else at that tomb understood. To defeat death permanently, he would have to experience it personally. To pull Lazarus out of the grave, Jesus would eventually have to go into one himself. To break death's power over humanity, he would have to let death break his own body. To prove that life is stronger than death, he would have to die the most public, brutal, shameful death imaginable. Every tear Jesus shed at Lazarus' tomb was a tear for his own coming crucifixion. Every moment of grief was preparation for the grief he would cause his own mother, his own disciples, his own father. This is why John places this story where he does in his gospel. It's not random that the raising of Lazarus leads directly to the plotting of Jesus' death. The religious leaders see this miracle and decide that Jesus must die. His greatest demonstration of life-giving power becomes the catalyst for his own execution. Jesus knew this. Standing at that tomb, he could see it all. The cross, the nails, the darkness, the moment when he would cry out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" He could see his own mother weeping, his own disciples scattered and broken. But he also knew that his death would be different from Lazarus' death. Lazarus would die again someday. His resurrection was temporary. But Jesus' resurrection would be permanent, and it would open the door for everyone who believes in him to experience that same permanent victory over death. Jesus wasn't just crying for Lazarus. He was crying for all of us, for everyone who would ever face death, everyone who would ever lose someone they love, everyone who would ever wonder if this broken world was all there is. His tears were a promise. I'm going to fix this, but it's going to cost me everything. What does it mean that Jesus wept? What does it tell us about the God we serve? First, it means God enters our pain, not just our problems. When you're going through something difficult, God doesn't just offer solutions from a distance. He steps into your suffering. He feels what you feel. He weeps when you weep. Your tears matter to him not because they're inconvenient problems to be solved, but because they represent real pain experienced by someone he loves. Second, it means God's power doesn't eliminate his compassion. Jesus could have shown up at Lazarus's tomb with divine detachment, snapped his fingers, raised the dead, and moved on. But instead, he chose to fully experience the human cost of living in a broken world. Power and tenderness aren't opposites in God's character. They're perfectly united. Third, it means resurrection comes through death, not around it. Jesus didn't avoid the reality of death. He walked straight into it. He didn't minimize its pain or pretend it wasn't real. He felt its full weight, and then he broke its power from the inside out. This is crucial for us to understand, because we live in a culture that tries to avoid pain at all costs. We medicate it, distract ourselves from it, pretend it's not real. But Jesus shows us a different way. The path to life goes through death, not around it. Finally, it means our current tears are not the end of the story. Every tear you've cried over loss, over injustice, over the brokenness of this world, God has collected them. He has felt them, and he has promised that one day he will wipe them all away. Jesus' tears at Lazarus' tomb were not tears of defeat. They were tears of determination. They were the tears of someone who loved too much to leave things as they were, who cared too deeply to let death have the final word. Why did Jesus cry if he was about to fix everything? Because he wasn't just about to fix Lazarus' death. He was about to take on death itself. He wasn't just performing a miracle. He was making a commitment. He wasn't just demonstrating his power. He was declaring his love. Those tears falling down his face were the overflow of a heart that felt every ounce of pain that death brings to this world. They were the expression of holy anger at an enemy that had stolen too much from too many people. They were the preview of a love so fierce that it would rather die than let death win. Jesus didn't cry despite knowing the ending. He cried because of it, because he knew that to give us the resurrection we needed, he would have to experience the death we deserved. That's the kind of God we serve. Not one who fixes our problems from a safe distance, but one who enters our pain completely. Not one who avoids suffering, but one who transforms it from the inside out. Not one who promises us an easy life, but one who promises to walk through every valley with us. And when he calls us out of our own tombs, when he speaks life into our dead places, hope into our despair, resurrection into our broken dreams, we'll know that it cost him everything. Those weren't tears of weakness flowing down Jesus' face. Those were tears of love preparing to pay the ultimate price. The next time you're facing something that feels like death, the end of a relationship, the loss of a dream, the diagnosis that changes everything, remember this moment. Remember that your God is not distant and unfeeling. He's not waiting in heaven, unmoved by your pain. He's the God who wept at a graveside even though he was about to perform a resurrection. He enters your grief. He feels your loss. He weeps when you weep. And then he does what only God can do. He speaks life into death, hope into despair, resurrection into the places that feel most buried. What feels dead in your life right now? What situation makes you want to say, Lord, if you had been here, this wouldn't have happened? Share it in the comments. I want to pray for you, and I believe this community can surround you with hope. If this video helped you see God's heart in a new way, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the moments that reveal who God really is. And remember, the same Jesus who wept at Lazarus' tomb is the same Jesus who called him out of it. Your story isn't over. Your tears aren't the end. And the God who cries with you is also the God who has the power to resurrect whatever feels dead in your life. Until next time, trust the God who enters your pain and transforms it from the inside out. Amen.